They say moving into a quiet neighborhood is the dream. But for me, it quickly turned into a nightmare. I had just bought my first home in a gated suburban community, the kind with trimmed hedges, smiling mailmen, and people who wave at you while watering their lawns. It felt like a fresh start. After years of struggling with my disability, I was finally regaining control of my life. My service dog, Leo, a golden retriever trained to detect seizures before they happen, was more than just a companion. He was my lifeline. With Leo by my side, I could live independently, take walks, sleep soundly, even go shopping without fear. We were a team. The first few days were peaceful. I kept to myself, unpacked boxes, and took Leo on morning strolls around the cul-de-sac. Neighbors smiled politely. One even complimented Leo's gentle demeanor. I felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, I'd found the right place to plant roots. Then came the knock on my door. It was a woman in her 50s, neatly dressed, clutching a clipboard, like it was a badge of honor. She introduced herself as Karen, the president of the Homeowners Association. Her smile was paper thin, her eyes sharp. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. Her gaze dropped to Leo, sitting quietly at my feet, tail wagging softly. "We have a strict no pets policy," she said. I opened my mouth to explain, but she cut me off. "Doesn't matter what kind of dog it is. Rules are rules." My stomach dropped. I tried to stay calm, to inform her gently that Leo was a registered service dog protected under federal law. But the look in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't going to be a misunderstanding. It was war. The first real confrontation with Karen didn't happen at my front door. It happened on a cool Saturday morning, just a week after I moved in. The sun had just broken through the clouds, and I was walking Leo along the main pathway that wrapped around the community park. He wore his blue vest with bold letters that read, "Service dog, do not pet." His gait was calm and steady, a silent guardian beside me, trained to sense even the slightest changes in my body chemistry. I was finally beginning to settle in, to breathe without the constant weight of anxiety. That peace shattered when I heard the clicking of heels behind me. "Excuse me," a sharp voice called out. I turned. Karen was marching toward me with her arms folded across her chest, her lips pursed like she'd just bitten into something sour. Without even glancing at me, she pointed at Leo. "He can't be on the lawn." I blinked. "I'm sorry?" "This is common ground. Pets aren't allowed here. It's in the bylaws." I kept my voice calm. "Leo isn't a pet. He's a medical service dog. He's federally protected under the ADA." She scoffed, brushing aside my words like they were an inconvenience. "Anyone can slap a vest on a dog these days. How do we know you're not just faking it to get around the rules?" The accusation stung more than I expected. I felt my chest tighten, not from panic, but from disbelief. I had dealt with ignorance before, but never this bold, never this entitled. I reached into my bag and offered her a laminated copy of Leo's certification and my doctor's note. Karen waved it away like it was contaminated. "The HOA doesn't recognize these. We have our own guidelines." She spoke with the confidence of someone who believed she was the law. There was no reasoning, no discussion, just declarations. I tried again, explaining that federal law supersedes HOA regulations when it comes to service animals. But Karen didn't want facts. She wanted control. She narrowed her eyes and said, "Then maybe we need to review your residency status. You're new here. Don't expect special treatment." I stood frozen on the sidewalk as she turned and walked away, muttering something about entitled newcomers. Leo leaned against my leg, sensing my tension. I crouched down to pet him, and in that moment, I felt a mix of rage and helplessness brewing inside me. She hadn't just questioned my dog. She had questioned my illness, my legitimacy, my right to exist in the same space as everyone else. As we finished the walk, I noticed blinds shifting behind windows, faces disappearing just as quickly as they appeared. Word would spread fast. Karen had drawn her line in the sand, and I had no idea just how far she'd go to keep me and Leo out. At first, I wanted to believe it was just a fluke. Maybe Karen had a bad day. Maybe she'd cool off, do some research, and realize she was in the wrong. But within days, it became clear this was not about misunderstanding. It was a campaign. The first letter appeared in my mailbox 3 days after our conversation. A formal HOA notice, printed on stiff paper with the association's emblem in the corner. It cited me for unauthorized presence of a pet in common areas and warned that further violations would result in fines. My stomach sank. There was no mention of Leo being a service dog, no acknowledgement of our discussion. Just a cold, legal-sounding threat. I tried to reach out. I wrote an email, attached the documents again, and explained the protections under the Americans with Disabilities Act. I received no response. But the next day, a second letter arrived. This time it included a fine of $75. That weekend, I noticed Karen holding a clipboard during a community gathering near the clubhouse. She wasn't just socializing, she was organizing. I overheard her talking to neighbors, saying things like, "We can't let one person break the rules for everyone," and "It sets a dangerous precedent." People glanced at me, some with discomfort, others with pity, a few with thinly veiled disdain. I wasn't just the new neighbor anymore. I was the problem. Then came the noise complaints. It didn't make sense. Leo didn't bark. He didn't run around the yard. He was trained for calm and alertness, always by my side. Yet I started receiving warnings for disturbances and animal-related disruptions. One letter claimed Leo had chased a child, though we had never even been outside at the time the incident allegedly happened. It was fiction, pure fabrication. I started to feel like a prisoner in my own home. I'd step outside and see Karen watching from her porch, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. A few neighbors stopped speaking to me entirely. One woman, whom I had exchanged pleasantries with the week before, turned away when I approached and hurried inside without a word. But the worst came when Karen called for a special HOA meeting. The notice was slipped under every door in the community. Proposal to revise pet policy to maintain neighborhood standards. The meeting wasn't about pets, it was about me. She stood at the front of the room, speaking as if I wasn't there, describing the issues my dog had created, the disturbances and safety concerns. She didn't mention the word service once. She painted Leo as a threat and me as someone abusing the system. I stood up to speak, shaking with anger and disbelief. I explained Leo's purpose, his training, the medical necessity of his presence. I reminded everyone of the federal protections in place. Some people nodded, some looked away, and some, probably the ones Karen had already swayed, rolled their eyes. Karen simply smiled and said, "Well, let's let the board decide what's best for everyone." The board postponed the vote, claiming they needed legal guidance. Meanwhile, the fines kept arriving. The threats didn't stop. And every day I walked Leo, I could feel the eyes on us, watching, judging, waiting for us to slip up. It was no longer just about Leo. It was about dignity, about my right to live in peace. And deep down, I knew, if I didn't push back, she would keep going until she drove us out. I remember sitting on the floor one night with Leo's head resting on my knee, the latest HOA letter spread out on the coffee table. It was another fine, this time $150, for repeated violations of pet policy. My hands were trembling, not from fear but from exhaustion. I hadn't done anything wrong. And yet, day after day, Karen acted like I was the criminal. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to roll over. I wasn't going to let her bully me out of the home I had worked so hard for. I opened my laptop and started researching everything I could about my rights, housing laws, service dog protections, what the ADA really said. And there it was, in plain, undeniable language. Individuals with disabilities have the right to keep service animals in all housing situations, regardless of no pet policies. Not only was Karen wrong, what she was doing was illegal. I called a disability rights organization the next morning and was immediately connected to someone who understood. The woman on the phone listened patiently as I explained everything, from the letters to the HOA meeting. She didn't sound surprised. In fact, she told me this kind of discrimination was more common than people thought, and completely actionable. Within a week, I was connected to an attorney who specialized in ADA and Fair Housing Act violations. He reviewed my documentation, my letters, my medical history, and said simply, "You have a solid case." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. For the first time since this nightmare started, someone believed me. Someone had my back. We drafted a formal response to the HOA, citing federal protections and demanding they cease all fines and harassment immediately. We gave them 10 business days to comply or face a lawsuit. I delivered it by certified mail and made sure Karen signed for it herself. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. Maybe facing legal consequences would scare her into backing off. But I should have known better. Karen wasn't the kind to retreat. Instead, she doubled down. More fines, more false accusations, more threats. But this time, I wasn't afraid. This time, I was ready. The shift was subtle at first. Something in me hardened. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was preparing. Every interaction with Karen, every new letter from the HOA, every sideways glance from a neighbor became fuel. I started documenting everything. I bought a small voice recorder and carried it in my pocket when I walked Leo, just in case she decided to approach me again. I set up a camera at my front door. I saved every email, every voicemail, every written notice. What once felt like paranoia now felt like armor. My attorney was meticulous. He walked me through what we needed to prove: intentional discrimination, emotional distress, violations of federal housing law. The evidence I already had was compelling, but we needed more. We requested copies of HOA meeting minutes. They dragged their feet at first, but legally, they had to hand them over. When we finally received them, they were even more damning than I'd imagined. Karen had gone on record multiple times referring to Leo as the dog that doesn't belong here and suggesting policy revisions to force compliance. Her words weren't vague or careful. They were targeted and personal. My doctor provided a formal affidavit detailing my medical condition and Leo's critical role in managing it. The training facility, where Leo had completed his certification, also offered testimony, complete with logs of his coursework, tests, and performance evaluations. He wasn't just a companion. He was a highly trained medical aide. My lawyer compiled all of it into a comprehensive case file. The more we gathered, the more outrageous it became. This wasn't just a misunderstanding or neighborly dispute. It was targeted harassment. It was illegal. And yet, even as I prepared, Karen kept pushing. One day I came home to find a notice taped to my door, stating that I was now delinquent on fines totaling over $1,000. Another day, she marched right up to me during a walk and demanded to inspect Leo's papers, claiming she was authorized to verify service status. I didn't engage. I didn't have to. I just pulled out my phone and recorded her. The turning point came when my lawyer filed the official lawsuit, discrimination under the Fair Housing Act and the ADA, with an additional claim for emotional distress. It wasn't just about fines or policy now. It was about justice. I had been pushed to the edge and refused to fall. I wanted my voice heard. I wanted this behavior exposed. Karen had started a war she thought she'd already won. But what she didn't expect was that I'd come prepared, with truth, with law, and with the kind of quiet fury that doesn't shout, but moves mountains. The courtroom was colder than I expected, not in temperature, but in tone. A stark contrast to the fire that had been burning inside me for months. I sat beside my attorney at the long wooden table, Leo lying silently at my feet, his head resting calmly on his paws. He was the picture of discipline, just as he had always been. A few people in the gallery glanced at him with curiosity, maybe even sympathy. But Karen, seated across the aisle with her folded arms and smug expression, didn't look at him at all. She looked only at me, her face pulled tight with defiance. The judge entered, and the bailiff called the room to order. My heart pounded. This was it. Everything I'd endured, every sleepless night, every tear, every moment I questioned if I belonged in my own home, it all led here. Karen's lawyer stood first, delivering a carefully rehearsed defense filled with language about community standards, residents' concerns, and clarifying policy. He portrayed Karen as a dutiful board member simply trying to uphold the rules. There was no mention of the fines, the threats, the blatant denial of federal protections. Just a vague insinuation that my presence, and Leo's, had somehow disrupted neighborhood harmony. Then it was our turn. My attorney stood, calm and unshakable. He began by stating the facts, not opinions. He read directly from the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Fair Housing Act, emphasizing the language that protects individuals like me and service animals like Leo. He outlined every incident, the letters, the fines, the false accusations, the hostile meetings. With each piece of evidence he presented, documents, photos, recordings, the courtroom grew quieter. Karen began to shift in her seat. She crossed and uncrossed her legs, picked at her nails, whispered to her lawyer. The confidence she carried like a shield seemed to crack with each new revelation. Then the judge asked to hear from me directly. I stood slowly, my knees weak but my voice steady. I told the story from the beginning, how Leo saved my life on multiple occasions by alerting me to seizures before they struck. I described the humiliation I felt as my condition and credibility were questioned in front of neighbors. I talked about the isolation, the fear of stepping outside, the feeling of being hunted in what was supposed to be my safe space. My voice trembled once, but I did not cry. I looked the judge in the eye and said, "This isn't just about a dog. This is about being treated like a person who matters, like I belong." Then came the most satisfying part of all, the cross-examination. Karen took the stand with all the composure of a queen in her court. But when asked directly if she had read the ADA or the Fair Housing Act before sending her notices, she hesitated, then admitted she had not. When asked why she had dismissed my documentation, she claimed it didn't look official. When presented with her own meeting minutes, her words in black and white, she stammered. She denied knowing the law. She denied intending harm. But the judge was no fool. After a brief recess, the judge returned to deliver the ruling. His voice was measured, but there was no mistaking the firm disapproval beneath it. He acknowledged the overwhelming evidence that Karen and the HOA had violated federal housing law by harassing and discriminating against a resident with a documented disability. He pointed out the failure of the board to accommodate my rights and condemned the repeated attempts to penalize behavior that was legally protected. Then came the words I had waited months to hear. This court orders the HOA to immediately cease all harassment, remove all associated fines from the plaintiff's record, and issue a formal written apology. Furthermore, the court awards damages for emotional distress and mandates that the HOA undergo training on ADA and fair housing compliance. Karen's mouth parted, her eyes wide with disbelief. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering frantically, but it was done. Leo nudged my leg, sensing my emotional release. I knelt down and hugged him, pressing my face into his fur to hide the tears that finally came. Not from sadness, but from vindication. I stood and walked out of that courtroom with my head held high, Leo by my side, and the heavy burden of silence finally lifted. Justice didn't erase the hurt, but it gave it meaning. And it reminded me that when you fight for your dignity, you fight for more than just yourself. You fight for everyone who's been told they don't belong. In the days that followed the ruling, something shifted, not just in the neighborhood, but inside me. For the first time in months, I stepped outside without bracing for confrontation. The air felt lighter. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. Leo walked proudly beside me, his tail high, his steps confident, as if he too understood what we had accomplished. Karen was removed from the HOA board within the week. The association held a closed-door meeting, and though I wasn't invited, word spread quickly. Some said she resigned in embarrassment. Others claimed the board pressured her to leave to save face. Whatever the truth, she was gone. The clipboard was replaced by a more neutral, quiet president who made it clear that everyone's rights would be respected moving forward. One morning, as I was tending the small garden by my porch, a neighbor I hadn't spoken to in months approached me. She held a cup of coffee in her hands and a hesitant smile on her face. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she said softly. "I should have spoken up sooner." I looked up, surprised, but not angry. It was enough that she was there, that someone was willing to cross the line Karen had drawn. Little by little, others followed. Polite nods turned into greetings. Casual conversations returned. Leo, once the subject of rumors and false reports, became something of a local celebrity. Kids waved at him, and older neighbors asked about his training. The neighborhood had been poisoned by fear and ignorance, but it was healing now, one act of kindness at a time. I realized then that this was never just about me or about Leo. It was about drawing a line against cruelty, about saying no to silence. What Karen tried to take from me wasn't just peace, it was belonging. And by standing up, I reclaimed more than my rights. I reclaimed my place. If you've made it this far, I want to leave you with something deeper than just a story about a dog in a courtroom. Because what happened to me wasn't just personal. It's something that happens to people all over the country, all over the world. Discrimination doesn't always come in screaming matches or blatant slurs. Sometimes it arrives dressed in politeness, hidden behind bylaws and clipboards, cloaked in a smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. It wears the mask of rules and neighborhood standards and concerns for the community. And if you're not prepared, if you don't know your rights, it will push you out of your own space, slowly and systematically. I want you to know this. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to advocate for yourself. If you're living with a disability, if you have a service animal, if you've been told you're too much, too different, too inconvenient, you are not alone, and you are not powerless. The law is on your side. But more importantly, truth is on your side. And when you stand in that truth, even against hostility, even against those who seem louder or stronger, you become unshakable. I didn't want to fight. I never asked for conflict. But when someone came for something sacred, my independence, my peace, my safety, I stood up. Not because I'm brave or bold or fearless, but because I had to. And in doing so, I discovered something I hope you carry with you. The moment you stop apologizing for who you are is the moment you begin to win. Leo never asked for recognition. He simply did his job, loyally, quietly, saving my life in ways people will never see. But because of him, I stood a little taller. I spoke a little louder. I believed in myself a little more. If you have someone or something that gives you that kind of strength. Hold on to it with everything you've got. This story had a courtroom, yes, but its real victory wasn't handed down by a judge. It came in the days after, in the quiet moments, when I looked around and realized I had reclaimed my voice, my home, and my dignity. And so can you. Stand your ground. Know your worth. And never, ever let someone make you feel like you don't belong. Because you do. We all do.